13 unconventional camp hacks that just keep getting better. Number 1, the red toggle. An injury while out camping can be pretty scary, especially since camping bags have so many pockets. In the moment, it could be hard to remember where you put that medical kit. So what I do is change out one of the toggles into a red reflective piece of paracord. This way, even when you're frazzled or caught up in shock, you'll be able to find your medical kit quickly or direct whoever you're with to find it easily, which leads us to number 2, the headlamp battery hack. And if you've ever opened up your pack and found your headlamp was turned on, and then later when you go to use it, the battery's just completely dead, well, this hack is for you. Whether you have a rechargeable battery or AAAs like this one, I'll change the direction of the middle one while I store it in my pack. And this way there's really no risk of it accidentally getting turned on. Then when I'm ready and at my campsite, I could easily just switch the battery around and the whole thing's good to go. So now you're unpacked and you're ready to set up your tarp and tent, which brings us to number 3. What happens if the ground is too hard? This is where the double rock comes in. With hard ground, there's generally rocks around. And you'll first take a medium-sized rock and wrap that cordage around it. Then you get a much larger rock and put it right in front. I always use a Taut-Line hitch here, which is very easy and adjustable, and I'll show you exactly how to do that, but in general, that double rock method holds up very well, especially in heavy winds. Which brings us to number 4, adding a high point on your tarp or vestibule. The Taut-Line hitch is tied like this. First wrap around your object, and in this case it's the tarp tie-outs. I'm using a 2-tone rope just so you could see what I'm doing. So take that tag or smaller end and wrap it twice inside this loop that's created. Now for the third wrap, go the same way but on the outside of the loop. And now pull the bottom 2 in the opposite direction of this top one, and you have your Taut-Line hitch. It could be remembered as 2 in, 1 out. That's 2 wraps on the inside and 1 on the outside, and that's it. So if you have this hitch as a tie-out, you can always just loosen your hitch, slide a stick underneath, and tighten the whole thing back up. This gives you both a nice high point or a vestibule to hang out under. And to remove it, you don't need to tie any more knots. You just remove the stick and slide your Taut-Line hitch, tightening the whole thing back up. Now, along with a high point, it's also very important to have low points on your tarp, especially if it's raining, because this is where the water is going to drain, bringing us to number 5, a drip line. Now you can always put a pot underneath that low point on your tarp, and this way it collects the water that drips down, so there's not a giant puddle there, and you get fresh rainwater. But the best way is to hang a line that goes straight down and right into that pot, and the drip line will allow the water to continuously go down and fill the pot. And perhaps my favorite thing about tying the Taut-Line to your tarp is hack number 6. The Taut-Line stowaway. Well, when you go to pack up your tarp, simply wrap up the line into a hank and put the line neatly through that loop, and you could tighten the whole thing down on itself. And this is incredible because you have your lines now pre-attached to your tarp. You just pull it when you're ready to use it, and it already has the proper knot tied there. Which brings us to another issue. Sometimes these tarp tie-outs can rip if you're in heavy wind, especially if you have one of those tarps with a grommet. This is hack number 7, the rip fix. Now there's 2 good options here. Grab your ripped end of the tarp, and for the first one, we fold it in a loop back onto itself. Take your line, thread it through the back side of that loop, and wrap it around and then underneath itself. Now when you pull tight, that rope will bunch up on itself. And this holds really well in strong wind and is easy to release afterward. And the other method is taking a smooth rock like this. Simply just bunch up the tarp around it, and I'll tie a simple clove hitch with a quick release, or you could really tie any knot here. With this method, the corner will be a little bit heavier because of the rock, but it still works really well, and the quick release is really nice too. Now what happens if your tarp gets a hole in it and you don't have a patch kit? Hack number 8 is nature's patch. This is a good way to get a temporary patch on that hole. The bark on a birch tree is waterproof, and so is the resin that's found on pine or fir trees. If it's exposed, just rub it onto the back side of that birch piece, and taking a flame to some of the harder bits will melt it and make it viscous enough to stick to that birch. If you find a tree like this with these blisters, you could pop the blisters, use a stick and not your knife because it's pretty sticky and messy, and this will work great as a waterproofing. Now we have our patch with the resin, and everything on here is waterproof. First put it over the hole, and then go back, collect a bit more resin, and now just cover up all the sides. It's a good temporary fix to get you through the night, and will repel a lot of the water, and will surprisingly hold very well through some aggressive winds. So now that we got our tarps all set up, it's time to get some firewood. And to keep our blades sharp, there's a really good hack. Number 9, the field strop. If you have actual chips in your blade, then you're gonna need a sharpening stone to hone it. But if your blades are just dull, you can simply use a leather strop. And that's why a lot of outdoorsmen wear a leather belt. If you run your knife backwards on the inside or flesh part of the leather, it's the real big secret to how to get a razor sharp edge. And if you want to help out the channel and get something really cool, I've just made these sharpener wallets, and they have the flesh side on the back with no stitching. Then on the front side, you have your field sharpeners. 2 dual grit diamond files. They don't require oil, they're lightweight, and they're perfect for your axes, knives, any kind of blades. You could find a link to that one below. And now that your axe is nice and sharp, hack number 10 is the bundle split. This works if you have one big log or multiple small logs. We'll tie a rope around it and have a jam knot, or really any binding knot. Cinch it up, and now you could split your firewood all at once without having to restack each piece. And when it's done, you have split logs already bundled up to carry away. But if you don't have an axe, or you're not comfortable using one in the backcountry, hack number 11 is how to split a log without an axe. Start by making a saw cut right here, draw an imaginary middle line through the center, and then a second saw cut in the opposite direction. This is sometimes known as a step cut, and make sure each of these go a little bit past that center line so that they're overlapping. Then all you have to do is strike this area with the cut part facing down. It's perfect if you forget or break an axe and you don't like batoning with your knife. It works surprisingly well on hardwoods and softwoods alike. From my experience, it doesn't work well on punky wood or if there's knots in between. So now that the sun is drawing low, we can think about number 12, camp lighting. If you break off the lower branches of those resinous pine trees that we talked about earlier, you'll find some of them contain this amber colored wood. It's called fatwood, and it's the hardened sap inside. Now, if you shave these down, they actually burn really well, and for a really long time. So you could use them as camp candles, adding to the ambiance, or if you get a whole bundle of them, you can tie them together. I use a constrictor knot, and it creates a legitimate torch. You could wave this thing around like crazy and it won't go out, which is great if you forgot hack number 2 and your headlamp battery had died and you have no lighting. So now you've had dinner, you're winding down, and your pots and pans are all greasy, but you forgot your sponge. Hack number 13, the nature scrubber. Just take your plates down to the water side, and you could add some sand in there, and slosh that around just like your gold panning. If you have something you're really afraid of scratching, you could use moss or any kind of grass instead. But the more abrasive stuff, the better it is to get off that grease. This little trick works surprisingly well. If you know of any other camping hacks, share them with the community below. I'm sure everyone will want to learn from them. I'm your friend DJ from the Bare Essentials, and thanks for stopping by.